found out on my way to Harlem. Ellington, you don't live around here. He moved away one day, so they say, from Harlem. I can hear his echo still. Now, you can't keep me away from where I was born. I was baptized by my daddy's horn. Now, you can't keep me away from where I was born. I was baptized by the jazz man's horn. Oh, I found out on my way through Harlem. Langston Hughes, he don't live round here. He moved away one day from his way here in Harlem. I know that Marvin Gaye used to play right here.
WHCR 90.3 FM, New York.
I was born. I was baptized by my daddy's horn. No, you can't keep me away from where I was born. I was baptized to the sound of horn. Oh.
Good evening. Welcome to Community and Technology, where we connect the global community and bring technology home. I'm Stu Reed. I'm here with my buddy Dave Burstein. Dave, you there?
Right here.
Okay. How are you today?
To Berlin, and that's what I want to bring home with me.
Did you say you had a trip to Berlin?
Well, this was 2 years ago.
Okay.
But I had the chance. I was up there for a conference, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But I had the chance to go to the incredible museums and see one of the most beautiful women on earth.
And who would that be?
Her name is Queen Nefertiti.
Wow. Yes, indeed.
She's a wooden bust, 3,000 years old, in color, and I can now bring a replica home anywhere I'd want it.
A replica? What do you mean, Dave? What are you talking about?
As you can see at our website, comtech.nyc,
Mm-hmm.
Nora al-Badri, a German-living woman of, I believe, Iraqi origin, walked into the Berlin Museum with what I think was a $100 Connect scanner hidden in her scarf.
Mm-hmm.
Made a 3D scan of Nefertiti and has released it under a Creative Commons license.
Wow.
I've downloaded it, and Shapeways is going to get us a quote on what it would take to reproduce it in different sizes and materials. I'm sure I'll be able to get a replica. This is unpainted for under $100.
That's incredible. I mean, is there generally available reproductions of artifacts like that? Is that something that's generally on the market, or I would think probably not?
Well, the Berlin Museum has made a limited edition of 100 replicas that are painted, which they sell for $10,000.
Whoa. Okay. Available, but at a steep
You
price.
download the Creative Commons license file, send it to any 3D print shop, and make a copy for yourself in your choice of materials.
Wow, wait a minute, Dave. Are you saying that there are commercial 3D print shops out there that I can send a file to, and they will make me a 3D object?
All over the place now.
Really?
Several in New York City.
Wow.
It's become a real industry because you can 3D print things like replacement bones actually being used in live people, models of cars, some incredible jewelry. Jenny likes the show Project Runway.
Mm-hmm.
And on one of the shows there, they had one of their designers make a dress all 3D printed. It's absolutely out there. It's absolutely practical. It works well. The Pirate Bay even has a collection that you can download of 3D objects, and there are thousands out there in the public domain that you can download from many places.
Wow, that's incredible.
3D printing is real. It's still a little bit expensive for things that you could mass produce, but it's absolutely the way for something if you just want one of them.
Okay, let's do just a real quick primer, Dave, because probably some of our folks in our listening and viewing audience don't quite know what 3D printing is. When you talk about 3D printing, it's not printing in the traditional sense in 3 dimensions, is it? It's the recreation of full 3-dimensional objects using a device that's called a 3D printer. Is that an accurate description?
Close enough.
Okay, well, embellish, please.
Basically, you've got a machine there that you can feed in like you could to a laser printer, some substrate, but instead of printing it flat on a piece of paper, it prints one layer, moves slightly, prints another layer, moves slightly, prints another layer. If you set it for a fine setting, the quality is superb. The cost is reasonable. It's fairly expensive now because the machines are pretty slow. So you're tying up an expensive machine for, I don't know, half an hour in order to make Nefertiti in a size. But it just lays down, and it can use everything. The 3D printing machines now, the first ones came out with a limited choice of plastics. Now, 3D printing machines have something like 17 choices of metal.
Wow. Hang on one second, Dave. I want to bring Lena in on the conversation. Lena, are you there?
I am.
Hi, Lena Marvin joining us from St. Louis. Hi, Lena.
Hiya.
Dave was just telling us about 3D printing and an astounding event that happened over at the museum in Berlin where a clandestine scanning occurred of the bust of Nefertiti. And a 3-dimensional 3D rendition has been printed. And I'm not sure what's happening with that or where it is, but Dave was just kind of giving our listeners a little bit of background on what 3D printing is and how it works.
If you could get a bust of Nefertiti and print it down the road from you in your city anytime you like at a reasonable cost, is that a good thing?
I'm inclined to
Nina?
think so. Yes.
And in
Yes.
fact, that's exactly what the situation is now. And I suspect every major sculpture in a museum or outdoors anywhere in the world will soon have similar. This one, and you can see it on Comtech.nyc, is well done, looks good, has detail. I've seen a larger print of it. And was made, I believe, on a $100 Kinect scanner, KINECT, that Microsoft put together to add to their video games. That's all it takes now.
That's incredible.
Now, what did they do with it? You said, where is it? Well, it's been downloaded over 1,000 times. It'll probably be much more because the New York Times just picked up the story. I don't know how many of those people have reproduced it. But the artists who did this in the first place, not the 3,000-year-old Tutmoose, Noor al-Badri and her partner, took an example to Egypt. Buried it in the sand, and on her website, there's a marvelous picture that will soon be up on Comtech.nyc of them unearthing this sculpture from the sands of Egypt. And they then put it in a museum there.
Wow.
Now,
They
say-
discovered it, huh? That's cute.
Yeah, the Egyptians are kind of angry.
Yeah, well,
It
you know,
was found in 1912, I believe, and a year later showed up in a Berlin museum.
yeah. Well, Dave, that's one of the very interesting things about this particular case, and I guess implications for others, beyond just the technology and the marveling at that, is the fact that the folks that did this are talking about. I'm just reading from a story that I'm looking at. It says the Nefertiti stands for millions of stolen and dead objects, which are buried in museums. So these folks kind of see this technology as a way of liberating art and artifacts that, and many believe were stolen over the last couple hundred years from ancient civilizations, and are now held captive in museum displays across Europe and America. And this technology, as these folks are using it, is a way to liberate that artwork. What do you guys think about that?
Lena, should there be copyrights on 3,000-year-old works of art?
Well, what's funny is they released the head under a Creative Commons license. What's funny about that is they should have released it under a public domain license, because part of the idea is that this is something that should be accessible to everyone. Now, there are people who argue that Creative Commons is better than the public domain, but I don't agree. I think that when you're looking at something that is this old, it should be respected as something that is in the public domain.
Can Lena, for those of us like myself who don't quite understand the distinction between the public domain copyright and the Creative Commons copyright, can you elaborate a little bit?
Sure. So, to start with, copyright is the idea that if you make something, you own the thing you made. You don't just own the physical item you made, but you own any copies that are made. This is the idea that if you write a book, someone else can't just take your book and start selling it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the whole idea. Now, copyright is something that is protected by the government. Governments went out and they said, okay, copyright, it's a thing and we believe in it. We will stop other people, we'll make it against the law. The public domain is the idea that somewhere down the line, after something is created, that protection should go away, that things should be available to everyone, that it should be owned by the public, that anyone can print up a copy and sell it. They can give it away for free. It's no longer owned. The Creative Commons, because the public domain is no longer growing, it used to be that the public domain grew every year because copyrights would end. Well, Mickey Mouse in the United States has tried to do away with that. And when I say Mickey Mouse, I mean very specifically the Disney Corporation is one of the big people who don't want, specifically Mickey Mouse and other things, to become part of the public domain.
It used to be, what, a 70-year horizon, Lena? Stuff would go into the public domain after 70 years of protection. Is that right?
70 years after the artist or writer died.
Oh, okay.
But
And
that's
it will
over.
continue being extended forever in our capitalist system, so long as Walt Disney has the power to buy Congress and make that happen, because they don't want the original Mickey Mouse cartoons from 1926 to ever be legally reproducible. So they've gone to Congress twice and got things extended. If they hadn't had the extension, everything from, what are we talking about, 45?
Yeah, 1946.
Everything from 1940 and before would be available today for free, such as the movie Casablanca, the book Ulysses. If it hadn't been extended in my grandfather's day, copyright was only 17 years and you could extend it to 34. That was true on audio recordings. So until about 3 months ago, any audio recording, any musician from before somewhere in the 1960s could be played for free. You still had to pay the songwriter, but you didn't have to pay the Beatles to play A Hard Day's Night, and so on. And under pressure from the Americans, this was in Europe, not in the U.S., the Europeans changed their copyright law to retroactively put under copyright and under control, mostly of 5 record companies, all the recordings going back to, I guess, 1926. Because they didn't want people to play the Beatles without helping John Lennon's estate get another $1 billion worth of royalties or whatever huge sum that's involved.
Wow. Okay, so now, Lena, how does the Creative Commons copyright differ from the public domain that we just talked about?
The Creative Commons is not copyright. The Creative Commons is a license. So it's the idea that you can put a license on something. So whenever you get those, they're often called EULAs, end-user license agreements, and you just click OK after a whole bunch of legal text at the beginning of a thing. Well, you actually agree to certain things when you click OK. A Creative Commons license is something that you can put on something that you have a copyright on. So there's this question of, if you make this scan of Nefertiti, I would actually say that you should put that scan, if you believe it should be free, as a public domain work. When you put it as a Creative Commons, you have the option to say that people cannot sell it. But a Creative Commons, there are different kinds. You can always share it for free, I think, is part of the idea, because you're putting it into a commons, but you can say that it can't, the idea is that with a Creative Commons you have these choices. You can say that no one can make a derivative work.
But now you have to be the owner, though, don't you, Lena, of the work in order to place it in Creative Commons. You have to be the owner of that work.
But in the case of this scan, they could argue that they are the owners of the scan.
Okay.
And that, I think, is valid. But there's a question. If it's done secretly, there's this question of how does that work? Because so sometimes at, say, a baseball game or something, someone might go there, and on the ticket it says, don't take any pictures. And by buying the ticket, you've agreed to this. But if somebody goes in there and they take pictures, they've broken their license agreement. But if they have those if they take those pictures and they upload it to the internet and other people use it, those other people haven't broken that first license agreement.
They have not.
That's a question.
Oh,
have
okay.
they or have they not? Because they weren't there, they didn't take the picture. They're just using the photo.
Right.
So it's actually incredibly complicated and bizarre. But I would say I'm incredibly in favor of these scans being taken and being shared. And as much as I love the Creative Commons, and I do, I don't know if it depends on how free they put together their Creative Commons. But I think it would be more appropriate to put it in the public domain.
Yeah. it's a very broad license here, and means you can do just about anything you want. Larry Lessig put together the whole Creative Commons, the organization and the legal part of it, the licenses, very carefully to make sure that they protected legally any of the challenges that might be brought in the future. So there's reasons to use Creative Commons as opposed to just saying, here, anyone can take it. It's in the public domain.
No, you can declare things in the public domain. This is the issue I have with Lawrence Lessig. I am not convinced that the Creative Commons is enough. I think it makes the ecosystem feel like it's okay for there to lose out on the public domain. So I don't agree with your analysis. I think this is something that if they truly wanted it to be free, they would put it in the public domain. And you can have multiple copies. You can have some copies that are Creative Commons and some that are public domain. And that would be the way to do it. But they didn't make that choice, and they may not be aware they could.
Do either of you have a computer in front of you that you could go to contact.nyc and see what's there?
Absolutely. I'm looking at it now.
Refresh the screen, because I've just added a public domain photo of Queen Nefertiti with the paint, and it's a quite good likeness. If you go to the read more, you'll see that the artist took it to Egypt and uncovered it, buried it in the sand, and then dug it up, and I have a photo of that there. Nefertiti is amazing. It's not, the photos are beautiful, the reality is different. What everybody notices in the reality is that the queen left in a little wrinkle by her eyes. Did not have the artist Photoshop it, or did not have the artist reproduce it, because she was so confident. This was an unusual thing for a king or queen to do anywhere in the world, even today. Take a look at the Velasquez's. And as I looked at this on the photos to set this up last night, I realized that she was apparently wearing lipstick and may have tweezed her eyebrows. 3,000 years ago. A lot of things haven't changed.
Oh, yeah, the Egyptians were highly stylized. Come on, highly.
Jenny said she figured that the lipstick would have been colored with betel nuts. I'm not sure whether that's true. I don't think of betel nuts as bright red. Mm-hmm. It may have been a carmine made from Assyrian origin, as many of the red dyes that are in our food are still made from small sea plants or small sea animals crushed up.
Okay, Dave,
See?
I'm looking at comtech.nyc, the images.
Yeah.
Now, the colored image of Nefertiti, that's a photograph of the actual original work of art, is that correct?
That the person who made the photograph put in the public domain, and I downloaded from Wikipedia.
Okay. And the black and white image, I guess I presume that the actual scan is monochromatic. Is that how that works, or what?
Yeah, it's
could
just the
be
color
done
of the
color,
plastic.
but this is monochromatic.
Okay.
And it could have been made in at least 70 different materials. If I wanted to look like obsidian, I'm sure they have a plastic that looks like obsidian. And if I wanted to be sure it was likely to last a long time, instead of making it in plastic, I could have it made out of aluminum.
Wow.
Yeah.
So now, what that raises a question. Just to kind of back to the 3D printer, what's the range of fabricating materials that the 3D printers can use? You talked about plastic. You talked about aluminum. Are there others?
Why don't you speak something else, because I'm going to look it up.
Okay.
And give you a good answer.
Okay. What'd you say, Lena?
So one of the interesting ways to get 3D printed things, if you don't have your 3D printer, there isn't one down the street from you, you can go to a website. Now, this is just one company. There are others, but this is one of the earliest, called Shapeways.
Mm-hmm.
And
Is that shape or shake?
Shape, as in the shape of something.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Shapeways, and you can say that you want it in these different materials. So their materials include aluminum, platinum, gold, brass, porcelain, ceramic, precious plated metals, bronze, sterling silver, metallic plastic, frost, and then they have these other plastic options.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fascinating because you can look at these materials and people will sell cases for things they've made, or like they have a piece of electronics. You can get custom iPhone cases or glasses frames, or all sorts of just kind of weird options, things you can add to other things, beautiful artwork that people have made using their own 3D things. So Shapeways, you can also upload or get things 3D scanned.
Mm-hmm.
What's great about the Kinect is that's something that can just be, purchased. But you can also get 3D printed selfies.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So it's like a bust of yourself.
And I, in fact, have one.
Do you?
My husband and I went to there used to be at 180th Street, there used to be a 3D print shop, and we got our heads scanned, and we got little busts of ourselves.
Wow.
Well, I'm sure that the little busts are beautiful, obviously. But, yeah, Shapeways is offered to come on as a guest, and we may have them on a future show. And this is good stuff. Sorry that we can't show it to you on the radio. Comtech.nyc has it. Stu?
Yes.
What else do we have in the news?
Well, we just had another presidential primary yesterday. And one of the things that, of course, we're interested in on this show, but I didn't hear any of the candidates talk about, was net neutrality and their views on net neutrality and broadband. I know that you, Dave, have done a little bit of background research and kind of culled some of the high-level views of the leading candidates. Where do you rate them?
Actually, it was Gizmodo who did the research.
Okay.
And what I think you probably can guess. But so let me say what the candidates themselves said. Hillary Clinton says that because the competition is so weak, we've got to do more about how we create competition. She's committed to fighting monopolies, and she directly supported net neutrality in those words.
Mm-hmm.
She has an a big infrastructure proposal that proposes to spend $5 billion. What she doesn't understand is that the way the system works, that $5 billion will be grabbed by a few big companies and won't change what's available to you or me.
That sounds eerily reminiscent of President Obama's Broadband Technology Opportunity Program, BTOP, that came out both in his first administration and later a second round in his second administration. And from where I sat, I thought they were both flops. In that, much as you said, Dave, the usual suspects got funding to continue doing the usual things and very little innovation.
It's unfortunate because getting more people broadband would be a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not how the system is working right now. And until we know we have some guarantee the money is going to be well spent, I don't like any of these subsidies.
Mm-hmm.
Bernie Sanders made a big speech in the Senate in 2014, said that the fast lanes being proposed were grotesquely unfair. And he's serious about this one. He's knocked himself out and taken strong position.
Mm-hmm. Good for him.
Donald Trump has said Obama's attack on the Internet is another top-down power grab. Net neutrality is the fairness doctrine. Will target conservative media. I don't think I have to talk about Donald Trump here in particular, but I should note that this is utter and total nonsense. There's no way net neutrality can target any media.
Yeah, I don't get that at all. Hang on, Dave.
WHCR 90.3 FM, New York.
Yeah, I don't understand even in his in Trump logic, Trump think. I don't follow his line of reasoning at all. He's saying that somehow it's going net neutrality will target conservative media and somehow throttle conservative media's voice. Is that what he said?
Well, let's let our listeners decide whether Trump knows what he's talking about.
Okay.
Ted Cruz
I am not inclined that way.
You know, none of us are objective on the subject of Donald Trump. Ted Cruz called net neutrality, again, this is from Gizmodo, Obamacare for the Internet and the biggest regulatory threat to the Internet.
Mm.
If you want the federal government regulating prices and terms of sale on the Internet, deciding which websites are okay and which are not, then net neutrality is a great idea.
He just turned it on his head.
Again, let our listeners decide. Rubio is a little bit more thoughtful. He said but he has said you don't need net neutrality because any deals to charge some content sites more, gas lanes as some people call them, benefit consumers by allowing highly tracked sites to accommodate their visitors. Now, given that there has been no substantial difficulty in the network of just about anything, any of the billions of web views in the last year, I don't know what he's talking about. That's their opinion, and they were predictable.
Yeah, sounds like they fell pretty much along party ideological lines.
Yeah.
Democrats for, Republicans against.
Not all the Democrats are for. AT&T got 77 Democratic congressmen to write a letter opposing it.
Mm-hmm.
That was when I realized it. 70 Democratic congressmen are bought and paid for by AT&T.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we talked about that. Dave gave us a civics lesson a couple of weeks ago about the whole lobby industry as it relates to telecom, and I think we're pretty much bought and sold, Dave. If I read your analysis correctly,
there is some leverage in there. Most of the people in the system want to be honest. So if you want to influence them, you have to buy their friends and the people they listen to and all the academics that they think know what they're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But if you get involved in it and know what you're talking about, it's amazing the influence you can have.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard something I've written come out of the mouth of an FCC commissioner. He didn't credit me, but
he quoted you.
It was verbatim something I had written 2 months ago.
Wow.
And I'm glad that was picked up at the FCC.
Mm-hmm.
Now, cable TV. Stu, Doug, rather, you've been working with cable TV for a while, haven't you?
Yes, we have. Several decades.
Yeah. Now, how many choices do most people have for cable TV in New York City?
One. Some folks have two, but generally one. And to me, that's not a choice. It's take it or leave it.
And in most of the country, people have three because they can go to either of two satellites. It looks like something is going to change in that. AT&T, which bought DirecTV satellite,
Mm-hmm.
is now going to sell you what they hope will be a all cable TV program, up to 500 channels if that's what you want, wherever you are connected to the internet in the United States.
Wow, they're going IP with their entire content platform, Dave? Is that what I hear you saying?
At the end of the year, they intend to make that all available. Comcast has said roughly the same thing. They said a key reason they spent $50 billion buying DirecTV is not because they love satellites, but because it got them the rights to do things like this. Verizon is talking similar. So you will probably, within the year, have the choice to get your TV package over your internet connection, which could be mobile, if you can get around the caps, from AT&T, almost for sure Comcast. They haven't been specific. And probably much of it from Verizon and maybe somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so we're going from monopoly to oligopoly.
Well, we're still in a monopoly, unfortunately.
But I mean, the transition that you're talking about as these other providers start to provide over-the-top streaming cable TV service, for lack of a better term.
But unfortunately, it's probably not going to bring the prices down very
No,
much.
Right. Alternative does not mean competition necessarily.
It's not necessarily how much AT&T and Comcast and Time Warner want to compete with each other. It's that most of us want to watch a few things. NFL football, some other sports, the major Hollywood networks, and motion pictures. That's a monopoly because they're all copyright.
Mm-hmm.
And NFL will charge however many competitors we have doing the delivery the price they want because they own the NFL games. So are all the Hollywood studios. And in fact, at this point, most of the money for your cable TV programming is not winding up in Time Warner or Comcast or Verizon for Fios, but in the hands of the people who own the
content,
especially the five families that make all the Hollywood movies and most of the TV.
Mm-hmm. Well, now that brings me back to a story I read last week where one of the hedge fund managers talking about Comcast says that only 20% of Comcast profits come from video, that the lion's share of their profits come from broadband. That seems to support the trend that you are now describing.
Anton Wallman, one I respect, is the best broadband analyst on Wall Street because he saw that 10 years ago, before I did and before anybody else did.
Mm-hmm.
Broadband profit margins are extreme. TV profit margins are small after you subtract what you have to pay Hollywood.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, should we regulate the price Hollywood charges for their movies and TV shows? Let's not go into it in this show. But we should know that the reason it's so expensive, why you can get 80 channels, including most of the main ones, in France for $5, and in the U.S. it costs you $40 to $60 to get anything comparable. It's because the people with the rights to the programming are capitalists. And if they've got a monopoly right, which is what a copyright or a patent is, they're going to get whatever they can get. And Hollywood is darn good at this.
Mm-hmm.
Verizon wanted to get into the TV and movie delivery business since about 1993. That's, in fact, why they started putting in DSL, till they discovered that it wasn't going to work very well.
Mm-hmm.
There was a news report from Variety about 2002 that Verizon was going to jump in and sell all the movies on demand. That the Verizon people actually were in Hollywood talking to all the major studios, and Variety presumably knew the folks at the major studios, and the story was well sourced. It didn't happen.
Right.
because when Verizon negotiators got back to New York, gave the numbers, they said, Hollywood won so much money, there's no way we can make any money on this. And that was confirmed to me a few years later. There is video on Fios. But Larry Babbio, who was at that time president of Verizon, he's retired now, when I asked him the question about this, would you let Comcast send the video over your network, he said, we make our money on the data and the voice. We don't make much money on video. If letting in more video people meant that more people bought data for us, we'd be all in favor of it. And in fact, I can confirm from one of the people themselves that back in 2004, Comcast's Brian Roberts and Verizon's Ivan Seidenberg talked about running the Comcast programming over the Verizon fiber network. It didn't happen for some business reasons. It's now starting to happen, but it's going to be the giants again because you needed to have the cloud of the DirecTV bought for $50 billion to have any chance at negotiating with Hollywood worth the debt.
Mm-hmm. Now, back to your point just a few minutes ago about half a dozen or so of the big guys now poised to provide video cable TV-like programming on a national basis. But in fact, the pipe that you need to receive this programming is still going to be tightly controlled by one or two providers in your community, is it not?
That's the way it is in most of the United States, except for the few people who have no providers.
Right.
Which is about 14 million people.
Lena, do you have a choice in your cable and or broadband service providers in your area out in St. Louis?
So I always feel awkward in these conversations because I'm never looking for cable television.
Right.
I haven't had it in so long.
That's refreshing. That's refreshing. I applaud you.
Well, I don't think of it as anything special. I just get my media through Netflix and Hulu and all of, like, I cut the cord because I was a poor student and I've just never looked back. That said, I've started thinking of investing in Sling TV, which is a channel provider which is outside of television. It's available online. And that's because there's one channel I've started being interested in, which is El Rey, which is done by Rodriguez, the director. He bought his own network, and he started getting it onto different cable providers. So I've been recently learning about other kinds of distribution networks outside of regular cable, outside of Hulu or Netflix. So there are some interesting developments. At my building, I only have AT&T as an internet provider choice for wired. If I want other options, I would have to go with Clear, or I think that's what it is, or maybe something else, which is satellite-based, which is all of the choices are dreadful. None of them are as fast as the Time Warner I had in New York.
Wow.
And it makes me sad, but my building might be getting fiber soon, so that's exciting.
From the AT&T or from a second provider?
From a third party.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like Optimal Fiber or something. They had just been doing businesses, but because I live in a downtown, they're looking into going towards some of the residential buildings.
Wow. Well, this is really interesting. I mean, normally I would say, Dave, that is a sea change in terms of video distribution because, as you guys all know, historically, cable companies have never competed against each other head-to-head. They all had their predefined, separate territories. Until the advent of RCN a few years ago and more recently Verizon and AT&T, those two juggernauts entered the cable TV market maybe 5-7 years ago. Other than those two guys, there has been no head-to-head competition among one cable provider versus another. And so it sounds like we're about to see that, but then when you factor in the lack of competition with the broadband pipes required to receive that programming, it's a very muted conversation.
It's really dramatic how much the price of broadband has gone up because of the limited competition.
Mm-hmm.
10 years ago, Verizon's DSL packages cost from $15 or $17 up to $35. The cheapest package you can get on Fios, and they're not going to offer any choice in places they don't have to, which is going to be almost everywhere they have fiber soon, is $70.
Wow.
$70 is much too expensive for many people to connect to the internet.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, of course, more than twice the price of most of Europe.
Yeah, that's crazy. And then if you're going to take advantage of some of the things that we're talking about, the over-the-top programming, that's going to be some additional cost on top of the $70. So you're pushing $100 plus bucks right off the top.
The average American home is paying something between $150 and $180 a month without thinking of their cellular phone bill.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So now you're saying the pricing has gone up, but now hasn't the cost for the operator of broadband delivery gone dramatically down? The per megabit unit cost, hasn't that dramatically dropped over the last 5-10 years?
It turns out that people are using the internet more. So the per megabit cost has been going down 25 to 40% a year. These more laws brings down the cost of the electronics, and people's usage has gone up 25 to 40% or so per year. So the cost of the actual bandwidth has been flat, but it's trivial. It's $1 on a service they sell for at least $40 and often $70.
Mm-hmm.
The bandwidth isn't what cost. The wires aren't what cost. Two top Wall Street people figured out that the margins on broadband, on cable TV, on the cable networks were 90%.
Wow, that's a nice margin.
My number is 70% because I say we have to attribute some of the cost of repairing those lines in the field and having the trucks to do that repair and having the facility it all comes out of. So I put more overhead on, and I get to a 70% margin. It's a very good business and it's gotten worse. It's gotten much worse in the last 8 years. And the prices keep going up, even though the costs have come down. For example, I can buy a cable modem, if I was as big as a cable company, for about $40.
Mm-hmm.
That just isn't very much. Everything, all their equipment costs have come down so dramatically.
So where is the cost? You said that it's not here, it's not there. Are you saying there is no significant cost in this business model?
The real cost is somewhere between $5 and $12 a month.
Mm-hmm.
Probably closer to $5 for the big boys.
Mm-hmm.
The rest is all profit.
Wow.
Now, you get a different number if you include the cost of Brian Roberts' private jet, which is part of the corporate overhead,
mm-hmm.
and David Cohen, their chief lobbyist, $16 million a year salary. So when you throw those in, it still doesn't cost very much for this stuff, which is why cable stocks have gone up so much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Competition is great when it works. It doesn't always work.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I want to circle back for just a moment. You were talking about lobbyists. You just mentioned the $16 million a year lobbyist for Comcast. I thought that the Charter Time Warner merger had met all its hurdles, but I just saw a piece this week about some opposition at the FCC. Senator Harry Reid raised an objection, and I'm looking at another group that put up 300,000 signatures to the FCC opposing that merger. What's your take on that, Dave?
The take on it is the decision is being made by three people, the chairman and the two Democrats on the FCC.
Mm-hmm.
And unless you know exactly what they're thinking, you can't give a good answer.
Mm-hmm.
The general thought was it was 90% sure the charter would just go through. I'm working on an article that Charter has been so stingy with what they offered to get the merger through
Mm-hmm.
that the commissioners are holding back.
Mm-hmm.
And Senator Reid, who's the minority leader in the Senate, coming up and saying a lot of strong things on this subject, suggests that some people in Washington don't like what Charter is going. It's still highly likely that they will give some meaningless concessions to the FCC
Mm-hmm.
and get it through by May.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not guaranteed. They also have to get approval, for example, from the state of California, which is more than 10% of the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
There, it's a big fight, and there's a claim that at least one of the commissioners is going to vote against it. Very hard to fight a company the size of Time Warner and Charter
Yeah.
on a $60 billion deal or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm. Huge market power.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But as I say, most of the people, including the conservatives that I would vote against, want to do right, are not just bought and paid for. Congress happens to be particularly bad, but I know the people at the agencies, they want to do right. And so when you get to them, sometimes you can have an influence.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well,
Now-
it's certain. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to introduce the story of the Facebook executive.
Yes, that's just where I was going. We've got about 5 minutes left in the show here. Tell us about the Facebook executive in Brazil that was just recently arrested, Dave.
And was released the next day. He was found in contempt of court because the court ordered them to hand over the content of some WhatsApp conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And they refused to do it, among other things saying that they can't, which is probably true because they don't actually keep WhatsApp. The Brazilians, everybody around the world uses Facebook and hates the company. It's happening to Google a little bit too.
Mm-hmm.
But there's the powers that be in Brazil thinks that just as if a judge gives a warrant for a wiretap, the phone company should accept the wiretap order and hand it over. And in Brazil, where a judge gave an appropriate order on a narcotics and organized crime case that was apparently substantial, and Facebook said, not our problem. They've been fined heavily.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, Brazilian government, how many bananas do you ship? And they actually arrested the vice president of Facebook and held him overnight.
Did they release him?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Today.
I was going to say, that's pretty extreme, arresting an official of the offending company, is it not?
Well, if you want to have an effect, you've got to go to them and not just the company with fines.
Mm-hmm.
You want to prevent Volkswagen from polluting the air at 10 times the rate that they're allowed by faking the diesel test. You want to make sure that the head of Volkswagen knows he could lose his job and his bonus and his salary.
Mm-hmm. Now, what about Tim Cook and Apple? Do you see that happening potentially in that case?
Well, they're fighting against the U.S. government every way they can. And surprisingly, many people are backing them up, including, for example, Microsoft and Verizon. The reason Cook is doing it is partially because he believes in it, but they hand over hundreds of people's records. To prevent them needing to hand over, they're now encrypting so that they can't hand it over because they can't get it.
Mm-hmm.
And this particular battle is over the encryption.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Reason that Tim Cook has to fight this as hard as he can may or may not have to do with his personal belief, but if he gives the U.S. government access to everything on the iPhones, how can he not give the Chinese government access to all the iPhones in China?
Yeah, you can't draw the line once you open it up.
And that is going to be a hard thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because there is a government in China that's internationally recognized. In India, same story has come up. They've been fighting with BlackBerry for years in order to get what's there, saying if you want to do business in India, BlackBerry, you have to honor our words. Mm-hmm. And India is a democracy that may not be any more corrupt than the United States and New York State in particular. So how do they say to India, which is the second largest market in the world for Facebook, well, your laws don't mean anything to us. We're a big multinational company. And this is being fought out all over the world. $100,000 fine for piracy in Germany was the number this year. And the U.S. companies get noticed most because most of the really big multinationals come from the U.S.
Right.
There's no reason to think France Telecom is going to be any different. And in fact, one of the ones I'm following is the multinational phone company MTN from South Africa, which has been hit by a $3 billion fine for clearly breaking the law in Nigeria, where they have, 40 million or 50 million mobile phone customers.
Now, that is a fine with teeth, $3 billion. Wow, I'm impressed. But listen, Dave, we're going to have to cut this short. This is a fascinating conversation. I hope we can pick it up again next week on Community and Technology. We're winding down. I want to thank Dave Burstein for calling in and being the font of information as usual. Thank you, Dave.
I have lots of useless information.
Yeah. And Lena Marvin. Thank you so much, Lena, for checking in from St. Louis.
It was a joy.
Okay. Look forward to speaking.
And bring us back some good music.
Okay. I look forward to speaking with you both next week. 5 o'clock, WHCR, 90.3 FM, Community and Technology. Stay tuned for Brother Bill with news at the top of the hour.
Skyline